Well, your help is focusing on, in particular, the weakness of communication strategies. Maybe you can take us through some of your suggestions on how to improve this, how to fight the trolls, the disinformation, through technology.
Yeah, so our report was saying that when we interviewed human rights workers, they would say na parang nabagyo sila the past 4 or 5 years. Parang human rights has become so broken and tarnished, and all the things that they have tried to build seem to have crumbled, no? But we also observed na parang when we ask follow-up questions, have you made any investments in your communication, in your digital media, in your communication strategy? Half of the orgs that we interviewed, actually wala silang communication or technology worker hired on a full-time basis. So how can you participate in the news cycle? How can you respond to fake news and disinformation, to conspiracy theories and red tagging? Lahat ito, di ba, are part of new digital attacks used online but also offline. But we are saying that human rights orgs cannot just continue doing what they do na palagi lang sila on the ground. Kailangan they also participate in a narrative battle.
I find it fascinating how you were able to make it so simple. Now there's the frontliners and there's the back channelers, and the dynamics between them and the implications of choosing between the two of them in short and in long term. For example, yung back channelers, yes, you are insulated from the attacks, but you may have repercussions further down the line in terms of whether you're believable, whether you're still acceptable in the human rights community, and whether people will simply still see you as somebody they can rely on. Tell us about that. And kumbaga, what's the better solution here? Is it somewhere in between, or is it moving between the two?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with that, and maybe Ross can follow up. So we make this distinction that orgs generally, no, na parang they can choose between frontlining. This means speaking out against government abuses, really responding to troll attacks head on, or even to government. To President Duterte himself. And of course, paminsan, hindi ito maiiwasan na may mention ang karapatan in the news, in Duterte's speech, for example. So, syempre, kailangan mo ding sagutin ito. So, for some organizations, they would rather pivot to the grassroots na will just focus on helping communities. Of course, of many victims of abuses.
Objective based, parang ganun, di ba? Parang let's do the work. Ganun lang.
Absolutely. Oo, na parang bumabad tayo sa barangay, sa grassroots. Pero kailangan that they would still lend support for their allies who are bearing the brunt of all of that attack. Yeah. Ross?
Yeah, so on my end naman, Ed mentioned kanina that there are trade-offs, and we think that the reason why some organizations choose to be frontliners and some choosing to be back channelers, sometimes it's based on their organizational mandate. So paminsan, if they're really into service delivery, they would have to take a more back channel approach para hindi mag-stop yung operations nila. But if they were, if the organizational mandate is to really call out state actors, then they are really forced to engage on a frontline approach. What we're seeing here in our report, siguro, is to, beyond these strategic decisions of choosing between frontlining and back channeling strategies, you have to look at also at the actual investments in communication. More than these strategic decisions, these investments in strategic communication matters most. And that's why we devote a lot of time in terms of saying na in terms of providing recommendations, in terms of how donors can change their structures, in terms of how organizations can have a better appreciation of communications, how they can have more empowered communications workers in their organizations and things like that. So this is one of the reasons why we try to center on the idea of communications. Kasi
Yes.
Yeah.
all of these considerations that we talked about, frontlining and back channeling, these are all just strategies. But behind all that, kailangan may material investments.
Yes, but Professor-
investments in material resources.
Yeah, Professor Fallurini, let me just stress the last thing you said. There has to be investments in that also, especially when it comes to capacity and just embracing the fact that that's a real part of the job, di ba? Hindi pwedeng banat ka lang ng banat. You really do have to invest in communications, in engagement, in networking. But to that point, on engagement and networking, yung sa back channeling, so not sa frontline, sa back channeling, did you also find in effect that it pays off? I mean, when speaking to quote-unquote the other side, when speaking with state agents, state enforcers, LGUs, national government, that what did your study find in terms of how effective that can be and how receptive the quote-unquote other side actually is?
Right. That's interesting kasi in our study we found na again may mga pros and cons in each strategy, but for yung pros naman when it comes to back channeling is that kung frontliner ka, you would go for national legislation in terms of pushing for particular measures. Pero pag back channeler ka, behind the scenes ka kasi, di ba? So what they try to do is to go to more local and regional LGUs to be able to enact certain legislations and ordinances. We have one respondent who shared to us na they found successes in terms of promoting the Human Rights Defenders Bill, not in the national level, not at the national level, but through passing legislations by continuous dialogue with local government leaders. So that's one way of putting it. There are successes that organizations can look to in terms of that back channeling approach.